Imagine being the quiet kid in class. You're skinny, you're broke, and you speak with a weird accent that makes everyone mock you. You are the ultimate outsider. You're angry, you're lonely, and you spend your lunch breaks reading books while the rich kids party. By all accounts, you're destined to be a nobody, a footnote. But fast forward just 20 years, and you are the single most powerful human being on the planet. Kings are begging for your mercy. The Pope is traveling to Paris just to watch you crown yourself. You have rewritten the laws of reality. This isn't a movie. This is the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. And the question isn't just, what did he do? The real question is, how does a man with zero money, zero connections, and zero status manage to hijack an entire country and conquer Europe? To understand the rise, we have to understand the hunger. Napoleon wasn't born French royalty. He was born in Corsica, a rugged island that had just been conquered by France. Growing up, he actually hated France. He viewed them as oppressors. When he was sent to military school on the mainland, he was bullied relentlessly for his thick Corsican accent and his ferocious temper. But while the other students, the sons of dukes and counts, were learning how to dance and charm society, Napoleon was in the library. He was obsessively studying history, geography, and most importantly, mathematics. He realized early on that artillery, cannons, was a math problem. If you could calculate the trajectory better than the other guy, you could kill him before he even saw you. He retreated into his mind. He wrote in his diary, "Always alone in the midst of men, I return to my room to dream by myself and to give myself over to the full force of my melancholy." He was a depressed, isolated genius waiting for a spark. And in 1789, the world gave him an explosion. The French Revolution shattered the old world. Suddenly, the aristocrats who bullied Napoleon were fleeing the country or losing their heads to the guillotine. The French army was decapitated. They had no officers left. This was the moment the meritocracy was born. For the first time in French history, it didn't matter who your father was. It mattered if you could fight. Napoleon saw the chaos, and he started to climb the ladder of corpses and chaos. But his first true test wasn't on a grand battlefield. It was in the streets of a rebellious city. It's 1793, the Siege of Toulon. A vital French port has been seized by the British and their royalist allies. The French commanders are incompetent. They are flailing. A 24-year-old Napoleon, just a captain of artillery, walks into the command tent and points to a map. He says, "You're attacking the wrong spot." He argues that if they capture a specific hill overlooking the harbor, their cannons can force the entire British fleet to evacuate without a single ship-to-ship battle. The old generals laughed at him, but eventually, out of pure desperation, they listened. Napoleon led the charge himself, taking a bayonet to the thigh in the brutal hand-to-hand combat. He set up his cannons on the high ground, rained fire on the British ships, and exactly as he predicted, the British fled in panic. Overnight, he went from a nobody captain to a brigadier general. He was 24 years old. But military genius wasn't enough to conquer a nation. He needed political leverage. And in 1795, he got it in the most brutal way imaginable. A massive royalist mob was marching on Paris to overthrow the revolutionary government. The politicians were terrified. The city was on the verge of collapse. They called Napoleon. He didn't hesitate. He didn't try to negotiate or reason with the crowd. He lined up cannons in the narrow Parisian streets and fired raw grapeshot, essentially giant shotgun blasts, directly into the mob. He cleared the streets in minutes. He later famously and coldly called it a whiff of grapeshot. It was a massacre, but it worked. It was calculated, and it proved one thing to the men in power. Napoleon chose order over chaos, and he was willing to kill French citizens to maintain it. Now, he was a hero of the Republic, but he was still just a general. To become a legend, he needed a miracle. He was given command of the army of Italy. This was supposed to be a suicide mission, a dead-end assignment to get him out of Paris. The army was starving, shoeless, and hadn't been paid in months. They were meant to fight the Austrian Empire, a continental superpower. When Napoleon arrived, the hardened soldiers looked at this short, skinny 26-year-old and laughed. Then he spoke to them. He didn't talk about duty or patriotism. He talked about greed and glory. He said, "Soldiers, you are naked, ill-fed. The government owes you much. It can give you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces, great cities will be in your power. There you will find honor, glory, and riches." He woke up the animal spirit within them. And then, he completely rewrote the rules of war. Before Napoleon, armies moved slowly in big, predictable blocks tied to slow supply wagons. Napoleon broke his army into smaller, faster, independent corps that moved like lightning across the landscape. They scavenged off the land so they didn't need to wait for supplies. He moved faster than the Austrians could think. He would find their armies, split them apart, and defeat them piece by piece. He made sure that even if he had fewer men in the overall campaign, he always had more men at the decisive point of impact. He won battle after battle. Lodi, Arcole, Rivoli. He didn't just defeat the Austrians, he humiliated them. He began redrawing the map of Italy himself. He was negotiating treaties with foreign powers without asking Paris for permission. He was acting like a king long before he had the crown. He returned to Paris not just as a general, but as a savior. The government, known as the Directory, was corrupt, broke, and failing. The people were starving and exhausted by a decade of revolutionary chaos. They wanted stability. They wanted a strong man. Napoleon looked at the weak government and saw a house of cards ready to be blown over. On November 9th, 1799, the coup of 18th Brumaire, he made his move. It was messy. He wasn't a great public speaker, he was a soldier, and when he tried to address the legislature, he was shoved and nearly attacked. But his brother, Lucien, saved the day by rallying the troops, the army backed him, and the government was dissolved by force. Napoleon was named first consul. He was just 30 years old. Most men would have stopped there. He was the de facto dictator of France. But Napoleon was possessed by a restless, superhuman energy. He famously worked 18 hours a day. He would dictate letters to 4 different secretaries on 4 different subjects at once. He rebuilt France from the ground up. He created the Bank of France to fix the shattered economy. He built roads, bridges, and sewers. He streamlined the government. And he created the Napoleonic Code, a single set of secular laws that established that all men are equal before the law, a revolutionary idea that is still the basis for legal systems in Europe and around the world today. In many ways, he had saved the best parts of the revolution by ending its chaos. But the final transformation was yet to come. He knew that as long as he was just a consul, his enemies would see him as temporary, a placeholder. He needed to be permanent. He needed to be a dynasty. December 2nd, 1804, the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. The Pope himself has traveled all the way from Rome to crown him. In the Old World, the king kneels, and the Pope places the crown on his head, a powerful symbol that God's authority is above the king's. But Napoleon was there to stage the final scene of his incredible ascent. Just as the Pope reached for the crown, Napoleon took it from the Pope's hands, turned his back on the altar, faced the crowd, and placed it on his own head. Then he crowned his wife, Josephine, as Empress. The message was brutally clear. I did not inherit this. God did not give this to me. I took it. The boy from Corsica, the bullied outsider, the artillery nerd who read books at lunch, was now Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. He had conquered his poverty, his enemies, and the entire old world order. But there is a great tragedy woven into ambition like this. When you believe you are invincible, when you believe you can bend reality to your will, you eventually stop seeing the cliff edge right in front of you. Napoleon had risen higher than any man in modern history. But as he would soon find out, the higher you rise, the harder you fall. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more.